I set up Gus Guitars in 1994. And initially, I first designed a G1 guitar, but I'd actually come from a bass playing background. The very first instruments that I started making were basses. When I was 14, I made my first bass, which was a plywood-bodied, mahogany-necked creation, big lump of a thing, which I used for a few years playing in the bands I was playing in at the time. But it kind of gave me the bug for guitar making, and I didn't know whether then at that point whether it was going to turn into a career, but I pursued it, and I followed the art school route rather than a conventional guitar making route. So I was surrounded by all sorts of different influences throughout my education. So I started off doing foundation in art, and then I did a degree and later a master's. But all the time I was trying to steer as many projects as I could towards guitar making, which was obviously my passion. But being surrounded by people other than guitar makers, jewellery makers, furniture makers, fine artists, printmakers, you pick up and a lot of different influences rub off. So from quite an early point when I was doing my degree, I started experimenting with tubular steel to create structures, instrument structures really. They're sculptural, but they worked as pieces. And I produced a small number of these instruments that I call Gitubes, which were a tubular steel creation. And I had one actually featured in a Seal video back in 1991, which was an 8-string bass Gitube I'd made. He wanted something to use for his Killer video, and he wanted something futuristic because it was that kind of video. It's the first video shot on blue screen in the kind of Terminator mold. And it kind of fitted the bill. I'd run into his manager's mother-in-law at an exhibition we did, our last final year exhibition at Smith's Gallery in London. And you never know where these things go, but later on I got the call to have this bass featured in the video, and it all worked out nicely. It got me a little bit of press coverage. I subsequently was able to sell the bass on, and it's now in Hard Rock Cafe. But yeah, so the tubular steel thing was really where I started looking at different materials and experimenting with guitar design. But after I realised that was quite limiting, partly in the kind of tone you could get from a steel instrument, and I knew that it wouldn't be very well accepted by conventional players. So I then started looking at combining the kind of aesthetic I'd got with the tubular steel with more conventional materials. So this is really an amalgam of various conventional kind of guitar making philosophies, I guess, with my own unique kind of aesthetic approach. And the G1 guitar really sort of evolved over a period of years, but with this G3 bass, I sat down at a drawing board. This was way before computers, actually, back in '96. And drawing full size, I just worked on the design in one go, rather than letting it evolve. I wanted to create something from scratch. And I knew that I wanted it to work ergonomically very well, because basses, probably more than guitars, it's really important that they balance, that they're bigger instruments, you don't want a neck-heavy bass. So ergonomics was important, as well as all the structural stuff that I said. So at this point, I'd already started experimenting with carbon fibre, and I developed the G1 guitar, which had a tonewood core of cedar wood covered in carbon fibre. And I knew that technology worked very well for the guitar, and hoped that it would work for the bass. And in fact, in many ways, it possibly works better in that it really allows the lower frequencies to respond well. You don't get any muddiness because the carbon is so bright and so stiff. And so those qualities work well for a bass. So it was a case of marrying that a composite technology with the tubey outlines. And it's, I mean, there's that old adage in design that form follows function, and it's an old tried theory really, but it does hold water. And I like to think that these things almost design themselves. If you set the parameters so you know that you don't want it to be neck heavy, so the balance point wants to be around the 12th fret. You don't want the instrument to extend much beyond the bridge because it's already a long instrument with a 34-inch scale. So you've set yourself a couple of parameters there, and it's not quite a case of joining the dots, but you've got something to start with. And I just drew up this shape, worked through various shapes, and came up with something which I thought would be aesthetically appealing and also function well ergonomically. It's actually got a concave convex body shape going on, so that when it's up against your body it's comfortable because there's a hollow, but on the top surface being convex, where your forearm rubs across the instrument, there's no sharp edges here either. And that theme is kind of followed through with the hardware as well, so everything has got a round edge. I hate all these spiky bits of stuff that stick up out of instruments. I'd never really understood this idea of having exposed screws. So everything is smooth on the face and all the adjustments are done on the back. So the bridge adjustments are done from inside the cavity, pickups are just from the back. But there's nothing you can cut yourself on the face of the bass. So yeah, all this hardware I make myself on my lathe, which gives me the flexibility to do things like if someone wants a slightly narrower string spacing, I can do that, or you know, in combination with obviously with the neck width and so on, and then I make all the control parts as well, and it also makes it unique. You know, I want these pieces to be very much mine. I don't really want to use bought-in parts on them, other than the machine heads really and the strings. I make everything in-house so that they are truly bespoke pieces.